Today's message from Reverend Debbie McDonnell was recorded August 21st, 2016. It's titled, Create a Masterpeace. Subtitled, We All Have Beauty That Is Waiting to Be Birthed Through Us. Come visit us at www.seasidecenter.org, or you can join us in Encinitas on any Sunday at 9 o'clock or 11 o'clock services. And you'll always have a spirited message, a joyful, loving, and vibrant community that awaits you.
Feel the joy, feel the peace, and the comfort of home, 'cause all are welcome here. Yes, all are welcome here.
Beautiful. Thank you. What I've been doing on Wednesday nights is I'm doing the year-long program from Centers for Spiritual Living from our home office. And about 140 of our centers have come together and we're following this year-long theme. Dr. Christian's been doing his book this year, so we haven't been doing it on Sundays, but I have been doing it on Wednesdays. So I just want to share a little bit about that with you before I begin. Marv, you want to show that slide? The 2016 theme is a global vision, a world that works for everyone. So that was our overall theme for the year. And then each month, this theme is broken down to a piece of our what we believe and the global vision. And I put a copy of that in your program today so you can see one side has the what we believe and the other side has the global vision. What we believe was written by Ernest Holmes, and it's in its original form. It was written in the early 1900s and stays the same. The global vision used to be called our global heart vision. It's been changed to the global vision, and it's been changed a little bit, but not much. So those two pieces have been put together and broken into our monthly talks and our talk titles. And this month is Beauty, Nature, Art, and Aesthetics. And that is from the Global Vision. That's from the Global Vision. And so that is August's theme. And what has happened is there's all the ministers throughout our movement picked different weeks and did the outline for the talk for the week. And this week's talk was written by Dr. Deborah Gordon. I got that backwards. Dr. Gordon, Dr. Ken's wife, Reverend Deborah Gordon. So the theme that we have, these are the two parts that have been put together. And the part that we're going to look at today is we see a world which has renewed its emphasis on beauty, nature, and love through the resurgence of creativity, art, and aesthetics. So that's what we've been looking at this August. And this is a subject that's really near and dear to my soul. I love creativity. I love everything about it. I love the creative expression. I love art. I love theater. I love fashion. I love just all of it. I love just making my home a pretty place to be. And so this has always called to me. The very first time I read this in our Global Vision, I thought, wow, what's that about? Why is that part of a Centers for Spiritual Living's vision for the world? You know, that whole marriage between spirituality and creativity. It just fascinates me. There's a story in Marcia Sinitar's book called Elegant Choices, Healing Choices, and it's one of the books that we use in our Practitioner 1 study, so all you practitioners have read it. And it's a lovely book, and what Marcia says, she says that when she was first starting out as a young teacher, she worked as a first grade teacher in an inner city ghetto school. And what she was interested in beauty. She was interested in creativity. So what she did is, she says she feels like she spent an enormous amount of money on fresh flowers. And she would bring the fresh flowers into the classroom. And what she noticed when she brought this beauty into the classroom, these flowers, is that the children seemed to behave better. So because she was so in tune with beauty, she thought she better check it out with her other teachers, and she asked the other teachers what they thought, and they assured her she was dreaming, that there was no correlation. But her thesis is that beauty is healing, and she continued on with that. And what she continued to notice is she continued to bring the flowers, which a lot of these children had never seen fresh, beautiful flowers from the florist before. And what she noticed is that they started to take a little bit of care of their little area, their desks, and their supplies, and their composition book, and their artwork. They just stepped it up a little bit. And they would come up and they would see the beautiful objects that she brought, the flowers or whatnot, and they would tenderly touch them, and they would whisper to her that, I like this. This is beautiful. And she noticed that it made a real difference, in the classroom. And she went on to continue to do this work with adults. She left the teaching profession and went into research. And what she studied and what she witnessed and looked at is how beauty affected people, how making these elegant choices in our life affect us. And what she found every single time, without fail, not one of the adults that she worked with in her career failed to make improvements in their life when they started choosing elegant choices. Just the smallest little shifts in their lives, So beauty matters. Beauty matters, and that's one of the things that I want to talk about today. There are so many marvelous quotes on beauty and nature and God, and I couldn't pick just one, so I have a couple for you. This first one is from Emerson. It says, Emerson said, "Never lose an opportunity to see anything that is beautiful. It is God's handwriting, a wayside sacrament." Isn't that beautiful? It's beautiful. Jack Kornfield says that the awareness of beauty is the awareness of God. Frank Lloyd Wright, this is one of my favorites. He says, "I believe in God, only I call it nature." And Alfred North Whitehead, "Science's exclusions of aesthetics was its most disastrous error." Beauty in nature is everywhere. I call it the art of God. The art of God, and we see it, and we live in this magnificent place, as Gary said. We live in this place that is so beautiful that we can see it everywhere that we go. We go down to the beach, and we see the oceans. We see the sand. We see just the magnificence. We can watch a sunset. We go to the mountains, our local mountains, and walk in the pines, or go up to the giant sequoias and walk in that, and you just, that sense of awe and wonder. You can't help but feeling God's presence. That spirit is there, source is there, right where you are. You start vibrating in a different vibration, don't you? Knowing that you are there in the majesty of the divine. So in nature, it's easy. I think it's easy to see and to feel that divine presence. There's evidence of artistic activity in humans dating back to the Homo erectus period of 500,000 years ago. They have evidence of art being performed. Then more recently, 40,000 years ago, we start seeing the pottery and the cave paintings and all of those things that we know have been brought forth, that we know that art was happening, that people were creating things, that they were doing things. What is that urge? What is that need? Why is it that we feel this necessity to create? It's that inner urge, that inner drive, that spirit moving in through it as us, urging us to express in our own unique ways, in the ways that only we can. How you create is going to be different than how I create. We all do it differently, but we are all creative. In the book that Reverend Tammy read from, Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert, she asked this question. She asked the question, what is creativity? And the answer is the relationship between a human being and the mysteries of inspiration. So what is inspiration and who gets to get it? What is inspiration? Well, we know the definition of inspiration is in spirit. It's that breath, it's breathing in that breath of spirit. That's from its origins. But Elizabeth Gilbert talks about this whole idea of inspiration a little bit differently, and she talks about it on her TED Talks, if you want to Google her TED Talks and listen to them. But she talks about the idea of inspiration in the early Greek and Roman times. The Greek called it daemon, And the Romans called it genius. And they imagined inspiration to be something that was outside of ourselves. It was like a disembodied spirit, like a little fairy, if you will, that came and lighted on you and breathed that inspiration into you. So the inspiration really wasn't of yourself. It was something that came to you from a distance. And it was about the time of the Renaissance where we moved from having a genius outside of ourselves to being a genius. And we started changing that terminology, and man, all of a sudden decided they were the genius. You know, I'm a genius instead of being visited by genius. I don't know if that's good or bad or whatever, but it certainly shifted that idea of inspiration coming to you from somewhere else, coming to you from the divine, downloading through you, if you will, and being that expression of yourself in the world. You know, there is only one mind, right? We know that in religious science. There's one mind, the mind of God, the mind of Source, and it is the mind of all of us. Each one of us are individualized expression of the divine. Each one of us are an individualized part of that mind of God moving through us. So there's one thought, there's race consciousness, there's universal consciousness, all those things that we teach here. Have you ever had the experience of thinking of something, an invention, or a new way to do business, or a book that you're going to write, or a story you're going to write, or a painting that you're going to write or paint, and before you get around to it, somebody else has done it? Have you ever had that experience? Yeah, sort of that download. Somebody else got your download, you know? And Elizabeth Gilbert, she tells this great story that illustrates this. She, as you know, is the writer of Eat, Pray, and Love. She met a gentleman who became her husband. Well, before they were married, he told her a great story in the Amazon. And he told her a story about this road that was going to be built in the Amazon. It was this big road that was going to be built, and they raised all kinds of money. And some of the money got to the road building. Most of it went elsewhere. But some of it got to the road building, and they got enough to put together to start the projection of this road. And so the gentleman got together with the bulldozers and all the tractors and the tools, and they started working on this big, massive road that was going to go through the Amazon. Well, the rainy season came, and they needed to stop working. They finally reached a point where they could no longer work. The rain was coming down, 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 so they shelved it for the rainy season. They packed up their tools, and they went home. They left the bulldozers and everything there. And when they came back after the rainy season, there was no evidence whatsoever that the road had been started to be built. All of the bulldozers and the tools had been sucked into the earth from the rain. They were completely covered up. The forest, the Amazon, had grown itself right back over where they had been working. They had no idea where it was they even had been. Well, this fascinated Elizabeth. She thought, she hadn't written a fiction book in a while. She thought she'd write a fiction book. So she started to create a plot around this story of the Amazon. And she came up with a character that was here in America that worked for a construction company. And she was in love with the boss. And she was going to go to the Amazon and figure out what happened to this road. And there was stuff that was going to happen, but it was really a love story. And this was the story that Elizabeth Gilbert was going to write. Well, she was working along on it, and she'd gotten this inspiration. Her love at the time was denied entry back into the country. So she went overseas to be with him and to sort out the visa and the papers and all of that. And that whole thing took about 2 years, in which time she wrote her book, Commitment, which was her book about wrestling with the idea of being married and being in a committed relationship. And so from those 2 years, birthed the book, Commitment. And when she got home, she thought she'd take a look at this Amazon story and see what was up with it, but she just couldn't get herself motivated to write it. She couldn't get herself interested in doing it at all. And in the meantime, she became friends with another writer, Ann Patchett. And Ann has written several books, and her and Ann got together, and they decided to become pen pals. And they became old-fashioned pen pals. They'd write letters to each other once a month on their family and what was going on in their world. And one day, Anne wrote in her letter to Elizabeth, "I got this great idea for a novel that takes place in the Amazon." Right? So Elizabeth's reaction is like that. And when they finally got together, she said, "You've got to tell me what your idea for that book was." And Anne said, No, you tell me first what your idea for your book was, since it came first. And I'll read this tiny little bit to you. Elizabeth says, it was about this middle-aged spinster from Minnesota who had been quietly in love with her married boss for many years. He gets involved in a harebrained business scheme down in the Amazon jungle. A bunch of money and a person go missing, and my character gets sent down there to solve things, at which point her quiet life is completely turned into chaos, and it's a love story. Anne stared at her from across the table. You've got to be kidding me. Anne said, why? Elizabeth said, why? What's your story? And she said, it's about a spinster from Minnesota who's been quietly in love with her married boss for many years. And it's also a love story. You know, that idea of the download, of the one mind, that creative impulse that moves in, through, and as each of us. There's no shortage of ideas. You know, Elizabeth Gilbert's theory is that inspiration is waiting for a vessel to deliver the goods. And if you say no, somebody else is going to say yes. And it keeps on knocking until it finds a way for this to be birthed into the world. You know, and then she says it like this. She says it, I saw this incident as a rare and glittering piece of evidence that all my most outlandish beliefs about creativity might actually be true. That ideas are alive, that ideas do seek the most available human collaborator, that ideas do have a conscious will, that ideas do move from soul to soul, that ideas will always try to seek the swiftest and most effective conduit to the earth, just like lightning. Yeah. So these ideas that are alive, that want to have themselves birthed in this world. You know, in our own, Ernest Holmes wrote a book called Creative Living, which you actually can download on the Sides of Mind archives. It's got great essays by Ernest, and he has one on creativity. And this is what he says. Every one of us personally has back of us the potential of the universe. There is an irresistible potential pressing against everyone for self-expression. If we listen, we shall hear it, not as a voice, but as a feeling, a divine urge to express. If we believe in it, it shall manifest through us. And if we keep our consciousness active and alive to it, the volume that flows through us by our consent will naturally increase. We have to believe that it will. So all of us, every one of us has this creative urge pulsating through us, moving through us, urging us to step into whatever that hidden treasure is that Reverend Tammy was talking about. What are those treasures within you that Spirit is whispering to you to bring forth into the world? What turns you on? What is it you can get excited about? You know, I have so many people that tell me, well, I'm not creative. You know, and that's just simply not true. Everyone is creative. We are creative individuals. We are creative beings. We may not be artists. We may not be writers, but we are all creative. I have a sister who's a financial analyst, and she is a whiz with numbers and money and budgets and spreadsheets. That's her creativity. She gets excited about it. She likes it. She thinks it's fun. You know, it's not my cup of tea, but it's hers. My mother would tell you she's not creative. My mother is the most amazing cook. She's a chef. She makes dishes that are out of this world, and not only does she make them, her table is like a masterpiece. It's beautiful. My mother is creative. We are all creative in our own ways, however Spirit is choosing to show up through you. That is your creativity. Ernest says it like this. He says, a businessman has an idea. He thinks up of a way of doing things. He is using the creative law just as much as an artist that paints a picture. We speak of creative arts and creative people, but we fail to realize all life deals with creativity. There is no big or little, no important or unimportant. To the creative law, there is no difference between a child making mud cakes or a gentleman in the boardroom, or a woman in the boardroom. We'll add that. You know, Elizabeth Gilbert says that to call somebody creative is laughable because we are all creative. Each and every individual is creative. There is no one who is more creative than another. You know, do you have the courage to bring forth what it is that Spirit's wanting to bring forth from you? Do you have the courage to say yes to Source? Do you have the courage to manifest that what it is that is wanting to be manifest through you? And I leave you with the story of the daffodil farm. If you've heard it, it's the daffodil farm, and it's local. It's here in Southern California. It's up by Running Springs, Lake Arrowhead area. There's a daffodil farm, and this is the story of a woman whose daughter called her several times, Mom, you've got to come up and see the daffodils before they're gone. And the mother kept resisting and kept resisting. Well, after the third phone call, she finally decided she'd make the drive up the mountain from Laguna Beach to the Lake Arrowhead area. And it was a cold, wet day and foggy, and she made her way up the mountain. And when she got to her daughter Caroline's house, she said, "That's it, I made it, I'm here, I'm seeing you and the grandkids, and that's it, forget the daffodils." And her daughter said, "Oh, Mom, you really are going to regret it if you don't go see these." And she said, and by the way, Mom, I need you to take me to the garage to get my car, and I'll drive, because I'm used to the roads. And so they piled the grandkids and Mom and Carolyn into the car. And Carolyn drove about 20 minutes when Mom finally said, "We are not going to the garage, are we?" Carol said, "No, we're going by way of the daffodil farm." And so what they did is they pulled into the church parking lot, and there was just a small little sign that said Daffodil Garden. And they got out of the car, and they took the grandkids by the hand, and they walked the path. And as they turned the corner, the mother saw what she described as gold just dripping down the hills. And her mother said, who did all this? And the daughter said, "Come on." And they walked to where there was a little A-frame house in the middle of the field. And on the porch, the sign simply read, 50,000 bulbs, 1 woman, 2 hands, 2 feet, very little brain, 1958. The time that article was written had been over 40 years now, over 50 years that this woman single-handedly had planted the daffodil bulbs in the ground and created the most amazing garden with swirls and patterns and the colors. Each color was a different swirl. You can go online and see pictures of it. And the mother, she kind of got a sense of sadness, like she had wasted her time. What is it? She started to think, what is it that she could have done? One little tiny step a day for 40 years. And her daughter simply said to her, "Start tomorrow. Start tomorrow." So we all have this beauty that is waiting to be birthed through us. We all have this whatever magic that it is that is wanting to become here. You are the hands of God, the face of God, the feet of God. Here on this planet, allow Spirit to express through you in the most magnificent way. Listen for that inspiration, and find the courage to say yes, and then create whatever it is that revolutionizes your heart. God bless you. God bless you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Such a long way home from where you have been. And what will it take to bring you back again? And all your searching's brought you to this place. You cry for mercy and you long for grace. Feel the love, feel the light. Won't you come in from the cold? 'Cause all are welcome here. Feel the joy, feel the peace, and the comfort of home. 'Cause all are welcome You cry for mercy and you long for grace. Feel the love, feel the light. Won't you come in from the cold? 'Cause all are welcome here. Feel the joy, feel the peace, and the comfort of home. 'Cause all are welcome here. Yes, all are welcome here. Here.
All Are Welcome Here, from the album Path of Light, was co-written by Peggy Lebo and Reverend Christian Sorensen. It's available at www.peggylebo.com.